My name is Caroline. I am 51 years old. I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment, and I take the bus to work most mornings. That is what my daughter-in-law Patricia believed about me. And honestly, I never corrected her. She had met me twice before that Sunday. Once at a family dinner after she and Thomas got engaged, and once when I dropped off a gift after their wedding. Both times she was pleasant to me. Polite. The kind of polite that keeps a careful distance. She called me sweet. She once told her friend, loud enough that I heard from the hallway, that Thomas's mother was the domestic type. She said it like it explained everything about me. Like it closed the file. I let it go. I've learned when to hold my tongue. What Patricia didn't know, what Thomas himself didn't fully know, is that I have been the Chief Medical Officer of Northeastern Regional Health for 11 years. I oversee 14 hospitals. My department budget runs close to $300 million a year. Before this role, I spent over a decade as a surgical consultant. I trained at Johns Hopkins. I didn't keep this from my son to be secretive. I kept it from him because I raised him to work for things. I didn't want him growing up thinking there was a safety net waiting. I didn't want him to become the kind of man who coasts. And so he knew I worked in healthcare, knew I was senior in my field, but the full picture, the title, the scale of it, he had never asked and I had never volunteered. When Thomas called to invite me to Sunday lunch at his in-laws' house, I could hear something in his voice. A kind of careful hopefulness. He said Gerald and Diane, Patricia's parents, wanted to get to know me properly. He said it would be casual. I've been around long enough to know that casual at a house with iron gates and a fountain out front is never actually casual. I knew what this lunch was. It was an inspection. Patricia's parents wanted to see what Thomas had come from. They wanted to place me somewhere in their mental map of the world. And I had a feeling, based on the 2 brief times I'd been around Patricia, based on the things she said and the way she said them, that her parents were the type of people who sort everyone they meet into 2 groups. People who matter and people who don't. And that the sorting happens fast, usually within the first 5 minutes, and it's almost entirely based on what they see. So I decided to give them something to see. I went to my wardrobe that morning and I passed over everything I normally wear to work. The tailored jackets. The good shoes. I pulled out an old navy cardigan I've had for years. The elbows are faded. A plain blouse. Flat shoes that have seen better days. My mother's old handbag, the one I kept for sentimental reasons, worn soft from years of use. I looked in the mirror. I looked like someone's retired aunt who takes the number 12 bus and waters her plants on Sundays. I called a regular cab and gave the address. The whole ride there I kept thinking about my mother. She spent her whole life working hard for other people and she never complained once. She always told me that your worth isn't something you hang on the wall. You carry it inside. You know it. That's enough. I thought, today I'm going to find out exactly who these people are before they find out who I am. But I was not prepared for how quickly they would show me. By the time we sat down for lunch, I already knew everything I needed to know. And by the time dessert arrived, nothing in that house would ever be the same. Diane opened the front door herself. She was dressed like she was heading to a garden party. Pressed trousers, silk blouse, pearl earrings at 11 in the morning. She looked at me with a smile that was warm on the surface and very busy underneath. The kind of smile that is actually a scan. Caroline. So lovely you could come. Thomas is already here. The house was exactly what I expected. Big. Loud in a quiet way, every surface chosen to tell you something about how much things cost. The kind of home where the coffee table books are arranged by color, and nobody actually reads them. Thomas hugged me in the hallway. I could feel the tension in his shoulders. You look relaxed, Mom, he said, looking at my cardigan. There was a small note of panic in his voice that he was trying very hard to hide. I am relaxed, I told him. Patricia came through from the kitchen. Pretty, put together, cream dress, completely at ease in her parents' house. She kissed my cheek and walked me to the sitting room to meet her father. Gerald was a big man. Silver-haired. The kind of person who fills a room not because he's loud but because he's so completely convinced of his own importance that it radiates off him. He stood up when I came in. I'll give him that. And shook my hand. Caroline. Good to finally meet you properly. Sit down, sit down. What are you drinking? And that was the last time Gerald treated me like an equal for the next 2 hours. It started small. He asked which neighborhood I lived in. I told him. He nodded in that way people nod when the answer is more or less what they expected. Diane asked if I drove. I said I mostly took the bus. Another nod. Another small piece of information filed away. Patricia talked about their holiday in Portugal. Private villa, 2 weeks staff. Diane mentioned a renovation they were doing. An architect already involved, a designer coming next month. Gerald brought up a property deal he'd just closed and mentioned the number the way you'd mention the weather. Not bragging exactly. Just reminding you where he stood. I said how lovely, and that sounds wonderful, and you must be pleased, and I watched. Then Diane folded her hands in her lap and looked at me with a gracious expression. Thomas mentioned you work in healthcare, Caroline. Something to do with administration. Something like that, I said. It's such important work, she said. All those support roles. Everything depends on the people in the background, doesn't it? I agreed that it does. Gerald leaned forward. Are you still working or have you? He paused, looking at my cardigan, my shoes. Taken a step back? Still full-time, I said. Good for you. He said it the way people say it when they mean good for someone of your circumstances and your age. Keeping busy is important. Then at lunch, a long table, cloth napkins, too many courses for a Sunday, Patricia and her father got into a conversation about an investment property she was considering. Gerald gave her advice. Diane gave opinions. Thomas smiled his nervous smile. I ate my food. I listened. I waited. Because here's what I've learned after 51 years. People who believe they're better than you will always eventually say so. You just have to give them enough time and enough comfort. And when they think you're nobody, when they have already placed you firmly in the category of people who don't require effort, they stop performing. They stop being careful. And that is when you finally see them clearly. Gerald was pouring himself a glass of port when he looked down the table at me and asked the question that changed the afternoon. He thought it was a simple question. Something polite to fill the silence. He had absolutely no idea what was about to come out of my mouth. And neither did Thomas. Caroline, Gerald said, settling back in his chair with his port glass. I hope you don't mind. Thomas has been a bit vague about the details, but what is it exactly that you do? In healthcare, you said. He said it with that particular tone. Not rude. Just the tone of someone who is asking a question they already believe they know the answer to. Patricia looked up from her dessert. Diane folded her hands. Thomas put down his fork. I took a sip of water. Set the glass down. I'm the Chief Medical Officer of Northeastern Regional Health, I said. I manage clinical operations across 14 hospitals and 43 outpatient facilities. My department budget is around $300 million a year. I report directly to the board. No one spoke. I've been in this role for 11 years. Before that, I was a surgical consultant for 12 years. I did a dual fellowship in cardiothoracic surgery and hospital administration at Johns Hopkins. The room stayed quiet. Gerald's port glass was halfway to his mouth. He lowered it slowly. Diane's smile was still on her face, but it had gone completely still. Like a screen that's frozen. Patricia was staring at me. Not with any nastiness, just genuine shock. And underneath it something else. Something I hadn't expected from her. Thomas was looking at the tablecloth. I'm sorry, Gerald said. His voice was different now. Careful in a way it hadn't been all afternoon. Did you say Chief Medical Officer? That's right. Of Northeastern Regional. Yes. He knew the name. I could see it register. Northeastern Regional had been in the national business press recently. A major research partnership. A federal funding announcement. Gerald was a man who read that kind of news. Diane found her voice. But the way you, she stopped. Gestured at my cardigan, my old bag on the chair beside me. I don't understand. I dress for comfort on my days off, I said. I spend my working week in rooms where people use appearance to establish power. On Sundays I'd rather just be comfortable. Patricia spoke quietly. Her voice had lost its social shine. I said something. A few months ago. About you. I didn't realize you could hear me. I heard, I said. She looked down. I'm sorry. I looked at her for a moment. She was 29. She had grown up in this house with these parents learning this particular way of sorting the world. I didn't think she was a bad person. I genuinely didn't. I thought she was someone who had been handed a set of habits she'd never had a reason to question. I know you are, I said. And I meant it as more than just an answer. Gerald cleared his throat. He was trying to recover. You could see him working at it. Well, this is quite a surprise. Thomas never gave us the full picture. Thomas didn't have the full picture, I said. I kept my work and my home life separate. I didn't want my son growing up thinking there was a version of success waiting for him if he didn't build his own. I wanted him to work because he had to, not because he could afford not to. But surely, Diane started then stopped herself. Surely what? I asked. She shook her head. Nothing. I wish we'd known. And that right there was the whole problem put plainly. They wished they'd known, not because it would have made them kinder, but because they would have performed a different version of themselves. They would have pulled out a different smile, used a different tone, asked different questions. They weren't sorry for how they treated me. They were sorry they hadn't had the right information. There is a big difference between those two things. I didn't say any of that out loud. Not at that table. But Thomas was watching me, and he knew I was thinking it. And on the drive home he finally asked me something he'd never asked before. Something that had been sitting between us for years. Thomas insisted on driving me home. He held my coat, walked me to the car, and we left without much being said to anyone. Patricia stood in the doorway as we pulled out. Gerald had gone back inside. Diane was somewhere in the house, probably processing. We drove for a few minutes without talking. Thomas kept both hands on the wheel. Then he said, "Why didn't you ever tell me?" He wasn't upset. Not angry. Just asking it straight. "Tell you what exactly?" I said. "The full thing, Mom. Chief Medical Officer. 14 hospitals. 300 million. He shook his head a little. "I knew you were senior. I knew you'd worked hard your whole life. But I didn't know the scale of it. Not even close." I watched a man walking his dog on the pavement. A kid kicking a ball against a garden wall. Sunday afternoon, everything slow. Would it have changed anything between us? I asked. He thought about it. Between you and me? No. But, I told Patricia's family you were in hospital management. I described you like you were. He stopped. Like I was what? He didn't answer that directly. I undersold you. Without meaning to. Because I didn't know. You described what you knew, I said. That's not the same as underselling. Mom. He said my name in that particular way he has, when he's trying to make me take something seriously. You've spent your whole career building something that most people only dream about. And you've let people, Patricia, her parents, probably 100 other people over the years, you've let them look at you and see something small. Something manageable. Why? I've been asked versions of this question my whole professional life. Usually by men in expensive suits who couldn't understand why I wasn't louder, pushier, more interested in making sure everyone in the room knew exactly what I'd achieved. Because I didn't need them to see it, I said. I already knew what I'd built. Their opinion of me wasn't part of the structure. Thomas was quiet. And honestly, I said, there's something useful about being underestimated. When people think you're nothing, they stop performing. They show you who they actually are. Today I found out exactly who Patricia's parents are. Not who they are when they're trying to impress someone. Who they actually are. That's valuable information. So you did it on purpose. The cardigan. The bus. All of it. I dressed the way I dress on Sundays, I said. I just didn't correct anyone's assumptions. He laughed a little at that. Not a happy laugh. More like a laugh that comes out when something is both funny and sad at the same time. Are you angry at them? He asked. I thought about it honestly. Not really. Disappointed, maybe. I hoped Patricia's family would be warmer than that. I hoped they'd be the kind of people who make you feel welcome regardless of what you do, or what you own. But they're not. And now I know that. I'd rather know it than not. And Patricia? Patricia is not Gerald and Diane, I said. She was raised by them, which is different. She's got more in her than what I saw today. Whether she does anything with that is her business. We pulled up in front of my building. Thomas turned off the engine, but neither of us got out straight away. Mom, he said. I just want you to know I'm proud of you. I've always been proud of you. Not because of any of what came out today. Just because you're you. Because you raised me on your own, and you never once made me feel like we were missing anything. And you did all of this at the same time and you never made it about you. Not once. I didn't say anything for a moment. Sometimes the right response to something good is just to sit with it. You turned out well, I told him. That's the one thing I was actually trying to build. He hugged me in the front seat of his car the way he did when he was about 9 years old and I let him. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I'd go upstairs, make tea, and that would be that. But 3 days later my phone rang. And the name on the screen was not Thomas. It was Patricia. Patricia called on a Wednesday evening. I was sitting at my kitchen table going through some work papers. When I saw her name on the screen I sat back and let it ring once more before I answered. Caroline. She didn't say it brightly. She said it the way you say someone's name when you're not sure how they're going to receive you. Do you have a few minutes? I have time, I said. There was a short pause. Then she started talking. She said she hadn't been able to stop thinking since Sunday. She said she owed me an apology, a real one, not the kind she gave at the table in front of everyone. She said she'd spent 3 days going back over every interaction we'd had since she and Thomas got together, and she didn't like what she was seeing. I made my mind up about you the first time I met you, she said. You were in your kitchen wearing an apron. The apartment was small. And I filed you away. Decided what you were. And I never looked again. She paused. That's not something I can blame on not knowing your job title. That's just who I was being. I didn't say anything. I let her keep going. The thing is, I was brought up to sort people, she said. Nobody ever said that out loud. But that was the lesson. You look at what someone has, where they live, what they do, and you figure out where they sit. And I just absorbed it without ever questioning it. It felt normal. It was normal in my house. I know, I said. I don't want it to be normal for me anymore. She said it simply without any drama. And that's what made me believe it. I asked her how her parents had been since Sunday. She was quiet for a second. Awkward. Dad keeps bringing up how impressive Northeastern Regional is, like that makes up for how lunch went. Mom hasn't said much, but she's been different around me. I think she's embarrassed. Not about how she treated you. More about being caught out. That's honest, I said. They're not bad people, Patricia said, and I could hear her working through it even as she spoke. I think they came from very little when they were young and money became the thing that made them feel safe. Feel worth something. So now it's how they measure everything. I grew up watching that. I grew up doing it without realizing. Most people carry something from where they came from, I said. That's not an excuse. It's just how it works. I don't want to carry that particular thing forward, she said. I want to be someone who actually sees people. We talked for a while. About her parents. About Thomas. About the kind of life she wanted. She asked me, and this part surprised me, how I had managed to stay so sure of myself in situations where people were clearly trying to make me feel small. She said she'd noticed it at the table. That I hadn't flinched. I thought about how to answer that honestly. You get to a point, I said, where you realize that how someone treats you when they think you have nothing tells you everything about their character and nothing about your worth. Once you understand that, really understand it, not just as a nice phrase, other people's opinions stop having so much weight. She went quiet. Then, I want to get to that point. You will, I said. You're already asking the right questions. We talked for over an hour. By the end something had changed. Not everything, it would take time for things to really shift. But something real had moved. And I think we both felt it. After I hung up I sat for a while in my kitchen. My papers were still on the table. The tea I'd made had gone cold. Outside the window the city was doing what it always does, just getting on with it. I thought about all the years I'd walked into rooms and been looked at the way Diane and Gerald looked at me on Sunday. Assessed and dismissed before I'd said a word. I'd never let it stop me. I'd never let it make me loud or bitter or desperate to prove something. I just kept building. Kept working. Kept being exactly who I was. And that's the thing about quiet strength. It doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need to announce itself. It just keeps going through the long days, through the small humiliations, through all the moments when someone looks at you and sees nothing worth their time. Just keeps going. Because that's what strength actually is. Not the dramatic moment when you finally reveal yourself. Not the look on their faces when they realize they got you wrong. Those moments are real, and I won't pretend they don't feel like something. But the real thing, the thing that actually holds, is the ordinary Tuesday morning when you get up and do the work and know who you are without needing anyone else to confirm it. She stood anyway. Not because it was easy, because it was the only way she knew how to be. Did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.